Hello everybody and welcome to episode 37 of my YouTube channel. I'm going to do something slightly different today. I'm presenting a scenario that I used down at my local club recently, and this is based on the old tabletop teasers, in this case tabletop teaser 10 Rearguard, which I thought had a sort of flavour of the Battle of Valmy in 1792 to it, and that would enable me to get my newly painted Prussian army on the table. As those who've watched my introductory video will know, Charles Grant Sr. was the man responsible for getting me into Napoleonic wargaming more than 50 years ago, and it's appropriate that his son provides the inspiration for this scenario. Charles Stuart Grant published this scenario in the September 1979 edition of Military Modelling. Unfortunately, Steve the Wargamer has made it available to us all for our delight and delectation to this day online. So these are the forces that Mr. Grant included in the article. The Red Force, the Rearguard, which in this case will be French, included part of its forces visible on the crest or forward slope of the position, and part of it hidden on the reverse slope of the line. A bigger blue force, in this case Prussians, is set the task of tackling them. So here is the French rearguard or defending force, which I chose for this scenario. I'm going to play the game using black powder, and so you can see the black powder statistics here. Of note are the very small cavalry contingent from the 1st Carabiniers, who I painted up on a whim several years ago and rarely get to use them, so they're there because they're there. And then a mix of volunteers and battalions and the old Royal Army battalions. These are different in that the volunteer battalions at this time, based on Lynn's work, aren't allowed to form square. And the artillery is quite strong. There's battalion guns with each of the battalions, plus a company each of horse artillery and foot artillery. So the facing them, the Prussian force is based on Courbier's division from the Battle of Pirmasens, because that's what got painted, and that's 2 infantry brigades, one of which is a guard brigade, slightly better statistics, and another is a cavalry brigade, hussars and dragoons, and you can see them all laid out here, and they are a well organised and strong attacking force. So this photograph shows the setup at the beginning of the game, and at the top of the photograph you can see the Prussians deployed. I'll show you a bit more about them in a minute. The bottom of the chart shows you the French setup. In the games at the club that I played, I used the cards to allow the French player to show his units hidden behind the slope of on the reverse slope, as it were, of the hill. In the solo game, I used them to randomise the setup of the French defenders. So there are 1 card for each French unit, plus some blinds that to deceive the other player or just increase the randomness of my deployment in this solo game. I bought this windmill for forthcoming Honshoot game that I plan to build up the forces for after Salute. And for this I built one of them. Obviously, as I say, it's a Sarissa model, However, I chose not to follow Kellerman's example and burn it on the morning of the battle. So this is the setup once the French were deployed in my solo game, and I'll go around and show you the units individually. So this is the 2nd 30th Regiment of Infantry, so one of the Royal battalions, and you see them here deployed in column with their battalion guns deployed on the forward slope. And here's a horse artillery. They ended up on the rear slope due to my random deployment, so they've been deployed limbered. And here's the foot artillery, also deployed limbered, ready to advance forward. And here you can see the National Volunteer Battalion of the 2nd Côte d'Or. This is actually a battalion from my Toulon scenario, for those who've seen that video. And again, they ended up on the rear slope. The 1st Ladèche Volunteers are deployed on the crest of the hill with their battalion guns ready to engage the Prussians. And here are my beloved 1st Carabiniers, who are only 2 squadrons of the 2 regiments I've got painted. I really need to get on the table. And finally, for the French deployment, here are the tirailleurs or skirmishers, which are on the French right flank. So now let's move on to the Prussian deployment. So on the right flank are the cavalry brigade of Von Katt, and that's 4 squadrons of hussars, followed by 2 squadrons of dragoons. And leading the way for the infantry are the Prince von Baden's brigade of 3 battalions, and each battalion supported by 2 battalion guns. And the brigade also has a company of foot artillery, which you can see at the top of the picture. And behind them are von Roeder's Guards brigade of 2 battalions, deployed here in column of route, alternating. The company's facing alternate directions, as a throwback to Bruce Quarry, I think. They each are supported by 2 battalion guns, as in the other units, and they have another battery of foot artillery in support as well. You can see how I distinguish my artillery batteries. If it's only 2 guns, you only get 2 horses, but if it's 6 or 8 guns, you get 4 horses to a limber. So each of the infantry battalions had approximately 1 figure's worth of Schützen, rifle-armed light infantry. However, these are always converged into brigade, or in this case division-sized organisations, and sent on specific tasks rather than just screening the individual battalions. Right, so let's get on to the game proper. This photograph shows an overview of the Prussian army at the end of turn 1. So the first turn involved the first advances of the Prince of Baden's brigade, and for the purposes of the black powder order system, I've allocated the divisional Schützens to this brigade. And as far as the Guards brigade is concerned, they've continued in column of route and moving towards the Prussian right to form an outflanking manoeuvre with the cavalry. So moving on to the end of French turn 1, you can see there's been some change on the hilltops as the French become more visible to the Prussian. In the centre, the artillery have deployed, the foot artillery on the right as we look at them, and the horse artillery on the left. Beru has big job on his hands to command all of these units. Has moved himself close to the Carabiniers, having seen the Prussian determination to turn his left. So now let's move on to the end of Prussian turn 2. The turn didn't start very well, with the Guards Brigade failing its command role and was having to make do with the free move granted to them by being in march column. In the centre, the Schützen advanced to take on the artillery. Behind them, the Prussians advanced their artillery, wanting to keep their own infantry at long range. So we're moving now on to the end of French turn 2, which was a bit of a write-off because Beru failed his command role, and so nothing could move. So now let's quickly move on to the end of Prussian turn 3. So on the Prussian right flank, the Guards Brigade had a much better turn and got themselves forward in a position to start an attack and deployed into line accordingly. Meanwhile, in the centre, all of the Prussian batteries and battalion guns are deployed ready for action to pin the French units, and this resulted in the first casualty on the French foot battery. So let's move on to the end of French turn 3. On the French right, Beru got his tirailleurs moving forward to the crest of the hill. Beru also got his carabiniers moving forward to the threatened left flank, but only got one move. In the centre, the French gun line was reinforced by the 2 battalion guns of the Côte d'Or volunteers. And here's the view on the French left flank. Beru, the French commander, is too busy on the right flank organising anything to change anything on this flank yet. So we're now moving on to the end of Prussian turn 4. On the Prussian right flank, the hesitant nature of the advance of the Guards Brigade continued, in which they failed their command role and were unable to benefit from a free move because they were deployed in line. You notice Corbière is with them, so that means they also failed their re-roll. In the Prussian centre, they were settling down to give the ridge line a good pasting from their artillery and Schützen fire, and nothing much other than that happened. However, the foot battery was now disordered, as well as having received a casualty. And we're now going to look at the end of French turn 4. And here you can see the French skirmishers advancing down the slope to try and engage the Prussians. And on the left flank, Beru has managed to get the Carabiniers advanced across the back of the battlefield to support the somewhat lonely 2nd 30th Infantry Regiment. So we're now going to move on to the end of Prussian turn 5. On the Prussian right, the Guards Brigade has got itself organised and has started to ascend the slope. In the Prussian centre, the artillery bombardment continued, and the French horse artillery was getting the worst of it. In fact, they were both disordered and shaken by the Prussian artillery fire. The horse artillery only get 1 stamina, so their first hit shakes them. So now moving on to the end of French turn 5. So Beru is on the spot on the French left and turns the 2nd 30th to face the oncoming threat. In the centre, the French artillery return fire against the opposite numbers. The French tirailleurs on the French right in proximity to the Schutzen are enabled to move forward to engage the line infantry on the Prussian left. So let's now move on to the end of Prussian turn 6. So on the French left, the Guards Brigade has got its guys in order and have started to ascend, albeit slowly, up the slope towards the French defenders. And in the centre, in conjunction with that move, the infantry battalions and some of their artillery are started to move forward towards the French centre. Here's a close-up view of the Prussian advance, and you can see the perils of using markers with these units. The central Prussian marker has left its casualty marker behind. So let's move on now to the end of French turn 6. On the French left, with Beru in close attendance, the Carabiniers have moved up to guard the flank of the 2nd 30th Infantry Regiment, and thereby threatening the Guards battalions on the Prussian side. Meanwhile, on the right flank, the tirailleur fire has inflicted a casualty on the Prussian battalion into its front. So let's move on to the end of Prussian turn 7. On the Prussian left, the threatened infantry battalion has charged the French tirailleurs, forcing them back by an evade move, and then firing on them, inflicting a disorder and a casualty. Meanwhile, on the Prussian right, the cavalry brigade has advanced to protect the flank of the Guards Brigade, Hussars leading the way. Meanwhile, the Guards Brigade has opened fire, causing disorder and amongst the 2nd 30th and shaking the battalion guns, which only have 1 stamina. So now we're moving on to French turn 7. So the turn started with the French Carabiniers charging the leading Hussar squadrons. The Hussars countercharged, and there was a clash to the immediate right of the Prussian infantry line. Not surprisingly, with their heavy cavalry D3, the French won the combat, flinging the Hussars back on their supports, leaving them disordered and shaken. While the French Carabiniers themselves decided to rally back on their infantry. Meanwhile, Beru managed to bring forward the Côte d'Or battalion from the centre to support the threatened left flank. In the centre, the artillery duel continued, although the French were getting the worst of it. So let's now move on to the end of Prussian turn 8. And in the centre, the Prussian infantry continues its advance against the weakened artillery fire from the French centre, and also further pushes back the French tirailleurs. Even the 2 battalion guns of the Ardèche volunteers are disordered by the approaching fire. And you can see here that both of the main French artillery batteries, the horse artillery and the foot artillery, are both bearing shaken markers now. Meanwhile, on the French left, the rest of the Prussian cavalry brigade has advanced to face down the Carabiniers, with this time the dragoons now leading the way. You can also see that the gunfire from the musket fire from the leading Guards battalion has disordered the Côte d'Or volunteers, preventing them from charging next turn. We're now moving on to the end of French turn 8. The On the left flank, the French carabiniers make their second charge, this time against the Prussian dragoons. At the same time, the 2nd 30th Infantry Regiment charges the approaching Garde du Fus. So we now have two melees to resolve. In the cavalry combat, the Carabiniers are triumphant again, pushing the dragoons back beyond their supports. The 2nd 30th Infantry Regiment were less fortunate, and the combat resulted in a draw. And because they'd failed to force the Prussians back or indeed to break them, they were forced to change formation into line under my house rules. Because this involves another formation change or an extra move, they became disordered. So this gives an overview of the battlefield at the end of French turn 8. Right, so let's move on now to the end of Prussian turn 9. In the centre, the Prussians continued to threaten the weakened French centre. But on the French left, the last a pair of squadrons of Prussian hussars chanced their arm against the Carabiniers in order to cover the defeated dragoons. And while they lost the combat and were forced to retreat again, they inflicted the third casualty on the Carabiniers, thereby shaking them. In the ongoing melee between the Prussian Guards and the 2nd 30th Infantry Regiment, the Prussians proved victorious, forcing the French back and also shaking them. Let's now move on to French turn 9. Here's an overview of the French line, showing lots of shaken markers. So this highlights the fact that the four main units, the Carabiniers, the 2nd 30th, the Côte d'Or Volunteers and the Tirailleurs, are all shaken. So with 4 units shaken, the French brigade is beyond its breakpoint of 3, and the brigade as a whole is broken. And so we declare a not unlikely Prussian victory given their numerical superiority and trying to manage the game with a single French commander. So I hope you enjoyed that scenario. I think the tabletop teasers offer a good source of games for a limited gaming slot on in our case, a Monday night between 7 and 10. And so I've used them a few times, and perhaps it's worth resurrecting them from the annals of the Military Modelling and other magazines and giving them all a try. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and if you have, please consider liking and subscribing to help my channel develop further. And why don't you buy my latest book, Throwing Thunderbolts, which tells you a whole lot more about the battles of the War of the First Coalition. Also look out for me at Salute in April, where I'll be presenting my game of Pirmesens between the French and the Prussians. Thank you and goodbye.